Well, howdy friends, Brian Flechsig of Mad River Outfitters and the Midwest Fly Fishing Schools, and welcome back to another episode in our mini series on leaders, which is no longer can be declared a mini series. So today, I want to talk real quickly more about contact leaders. I think I promised in the last episode that was it on contact leaders. Well, there have been tons and tons of questions. First and foremost, we appreciate those questions. Remember to send those questions over to admin@madriveroutfitters.com, or better yet, you can pick up the phone and you can call us here at the shop. But we appreciate those questions, and every single question gets answered. And I want to touch on a couple of the big questions that I've had recently. In the coming episode, we're going to wrap up the contact leaders, and we're going to move on to non-contact leaders, which is of course dry flies and nymphs. So anyhow, one of the main questions that we've received is, as you know, we've shown you that one of the most important parts about a contact leader is that you want to match the stiffness of your butt section to the stiffness of your fly line. That's very important, so that the same amount of energy that's coming off the tip of your fly line is able to properly be transferred into the butt section. There's been some confusion on this. We'll talk about this a little bit further, like I said, in our next episode. A couple of things I want to be perfectly clear. And let's go back. If you do this, if you make the butt section of your leader the same stiffness as your fly line, then the butt section of your leader becomes a clear extension of your line. That's what allows us to use even potentially 8 foot, 9 foot, 10 foot or longer butt sections if you need it. And so we showed you a 3-part leader formula, which is what we now use for all contact fishing, no matter whether it's bass, bluegill, trout, streamers, saltwater, tarpon, bonefish, permit, pike, musky, doesn't matter. It's all contact fishing, and it can all be done with 3 or 4 parts, which we're going to talk about today. But a lot of people thought that this was just a leader formula to end all leader formulas, and it's really not. This is for contact fly fishing. Okay, again, that's primarily, for the most part, streamers, although it could be poppers. Anytime you're going to throw a fly out there, the loop goes all the way down the leader, the rod comes down, and you have contact with the fly. Okay, you're moving the fly. A popper, a streamer, a shrimp, a crab, what have you. So a lot of folks had just confused that, and they said, well, how do I do this for dry fly fishing? Well, again, stay tuned, and we are going to cover that in coming episodes. But let's have a look again at those basic 3-part leader formulas. So for a floating fly line, okay, so for a floating fly line, we're typically using a fairly stiff mono. Of course, you all know that one of my favorites is Maxima Clear. We do not typically use Maxima Chameleon. It tends to be too stiff. And if you are able to kit up the tip of your fly line with Maxima Chameleon, it winds up being too thin and not enough mass, and it also kind of messes with, makes it tough to come up with a good 3-part formula. So Maxima Clear, and then if you need to be larger than 24 thousandths and you live in the United States, then we move to Rio Saltwater. Rio Saltwater Mono is essentially the same thing as Maxima. It's the same stiffness. It's the same diameters, and it's made in Germany. So you decide where it comes from. But another one that we're using now more and more is the Cortland. The Cortland Mono leader material. And this stuff kind of falls in between. It's not as stiff as Maxima Clear, not as stiff as Rio Saltwater, same thing, but it's not a medium stiffness like, say, Maxima Ultra Green. So this Cortland is really kind of good universal stuff, and I'm starting to use it more and more. It's just that if you're, say, 22 thousandths in diameter in Maxima Clear, you'd have to go up to, say, 25 thousandths in the Cortland. I hope that makes sense, because it's not as stiff. So you need a thicker diameter. Now, another misconception that a lot of people had is that we're trying to match the diameter of the tip of the fly line. I've gotten tons of emails, and thank you again for those, asking what the diameter of their fly line is, the tip diameter of their line. And that has nothing to do with it. I've never measured a tip diameter. It has to do with the stiffness, then the mass, actually, is what we're trying to match. So for a floating line, we're using Maxima Clear or Rio Saltwater or this Cortland monofilament leader material. And let's remember that the butt section, the diameter of monofilament that you use, is based on your fly line. And we showed you a bell curve test. We've shown that in several videos. We'll do it again in the next episode. But there's a way that you can check and kind of kit up the proper stiffness. And if you can't figure it out, send us an email. We'll let you know. But the butt section can be as long or short as you want. Okay? You can, with this system, it works so well. You can literally make a 10 or 12 or 15 foot butt section if you want. Okay? So as long or short as you want. And the butt section is dictated by your fly line. Okay? And it's not just that all 6-weight fly lines take the same diameter. Okay, we need to know what grains. I need to know exactly what fly line you have, what make, what model, and I'll usually know, we'll here at Mad River Outfitters usually know the grain weights. For example, a 6-weight that is 200 grains, or say 180 grains, is going to take a different butt section than a 6-weight that's 240 grains. And that happens in today's modern world. So then your tippet, if we jump ahead, is usually around 18 inches, and that's going to be dictated by the fly. It has to be thick enough to in order, and stiff enough in order to cast the fly that you're trying to present. And then secondarily, it has to be strong enough to survive the fight of the fish. This is the only time that pound test comes into play, because you must have enough pound test to survive the fight of the fish. And then your midsection is typically also going to be 18 inches. We've done a lot of work in testing this, friends. And again, this comes from our dear friend Flip. And 18 inches is really where this midsection wants to live. If you make it longer, it starts to peter out on you. If you make it shorter, it's not enough and winds up slapping the water a little too much. So that midsection is going to split the difference, or thereabouts. That's a new symbol for thereabouts. It doesn't have to split it perfectly, just come close, okay? So that midsection is going to be 18 inches and split the difference thereabouts between the tippet and the butt section. Okay, so for now for sinking lines, sink tips, full sink, sinking heads, and intermediate lines, let's remember. And you know what? Let's click in. All right, everybody join me. Click in. I can tie any knot, anything. I am invincible. I don't know where I would be without my click magnifiers. Of course, available at madriveroutfitters.com. Click in. Oh, I was wondering why I couldn't see anything. Okay, now we're clicked in, and time to get serious. So for sinking lines, and it doesn't matter, sink tip, sinking head, full sink, and even intermediate lines, we usually go with a much shorter leader, usually 4 to 5 foot. I'm usually more like 4 foot, maybe 5 foot on an intermediate. Okay, so it's the same formula, just different lengths. The butt section is determined by the fly line. Okay, and it's usually 2 foot, maybe 3 foot on an intermediate, but I'm almost always 2 foot on my butt section. Your tippet is going to be 1 foot, and it's also going to be determined by the fly. It has to be able to cast the fly, and then it must survive the fight of the fish. And then your mid is also going to be 1 foot, and it's going to split the difference. That's what STD stands for, if you were not familiar. STD, split the difference, or thereabouts. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. Usually, if I have to split the difference, I'll err on the thinner side, especially on a sinking line, because the thinner the line, the faster it's going to sink, easier it's going to sink. And we usually use Maxima Ultra Green. I don't want anything too stiff for a sinking line, so we use Maxima Ultra Green, or again, I like this Cortland. The Cortland monofilament leader monofilament tends to work on both floating lines, and it tends to work pretty well on sinking lines, especially in the saltwater. When I'm fishing saltwater on sinking lines, I am using this Cortland because it's clear. I don't love the Ultra Green for saltwater all that much. It works great in freshwater. So anyway, so we're 2 foot on the butt, 1 foot, 1 foot gives you a 4 foot leader. And I might put a swivel. In fact, I do often put a swivel between the midsection and the tippet. Okay. Absolutely nothing wrong with swivels. They make leaders easy. And to go back a few videos ago, that makes it such that this is a leader that you never have to change. Of course, your butt section is your butt section. Why would you ever change your butt section? And we very rarely, if ever, change tippet sizes. I mean, for crying out loud, I mean, we're almost always 12 thousandths at least on your tippet on a sinking line. And that would be for freshwater. Maybe in saltwater, I'm 15 thousandths, maybe even 17 thousandths on my tippet. So I'm not going to change my tippet diameter, so the midsection would never change. So if you put a swivel in between the mid and the tippet, that way all you're ever doing is replacing that tippet as needed, and your butt section or midsection don't ever have to be changed. So one of the big questions that came about is, what about, say, pike? What about musky? What about barracuda? What about sharks? What about even snook? We often use some sort of bite tippet, or also called shock tippet. Well, in the coming weeks, we're going to expand this 3-part formula. In fact, we're going to start today, and then we'll talk more about this. But you can easily make any leader. We're going to show you this. We're going to show you that you can make any leader in the world, contact or non-contact, with 3 or 4 parts. That's it. 3 or 4 parts ever to make any leader for any situation. So the formula doesn't change, okay? So let's say you wanted a 10-foot leader and you're fishing a floating fly line. So since the mid is 18 inches, the tippet is 18 inches, just subtract 3 foot. So your butt section, dictated by the fly line, and it's 7 foot. Your mid section splits the difference, STD, and that's 18 inches. Your tippet is dictated by the fly. It's got to throw the fly first, and then it's got to land the fish, and it's going to be around 18 inches. Now, if you're pike fishing or musky fishing, we are simply going to add a 4th section and that's going to be your bite tippet or your shock tippet. For pike, for barracuda, for sharks, we most often use wire. And there's some really great tieable stainless steel wire. Of course, I have the Cortland Bite Guard tieable stainless steel wire. I think it's a very good value. And you're typically going to add 8 to 10 inches of that bite guard. I don't usually go much more than about 10 inches, and I probably wouldn't go less. Okay, if you have more than 10 inches, it becomes challenging at times for that tippet to turn it over as well as the fly, because you're then asking a skinny kid to push a fat kid. At that point, by the time the energy reaches the end of the leader, we're assuming that the energy is just going to carry, it's just going to kick over, just the momentum of the energy will kick over 8 to 10 inches. If you go much more than that, you start to run into some casting issues. If you go shorter than that, especially with a pike or a musky or a barracuda, you could run into a situation where that bite tippet is not long enough. So for a lot of saltwater fishing, say tarpon fishing, snook fishing, and musky fishing, a lot of folks much prefer monofilament, or in some cases, of course, people talk about fluorocarbon. Okay. I don't personally use fluorocarbon. I've seen a lot of the independent testing these days that shows that monofilament is more abrasion resistant than fluorocarbon. That's a question that we get a lot. We are actually working on a testing machine, and we're going to do some of our own independent testing and put that to rest. And again, I learned this from Lefty Cray. I learned this especially from Flip Pallet. He is vehemently opposed to fluorocarbon, doesn't ever use it. I still know. So you can use it if you want. This is America.
It's America.
And you can use fluorocarbon if you want. I personally do not. And I've caught a lot of tarpon in my life with using monofilament for the bite guard. Of course, if you do use fluorocarbon, check out the Cortland XTR as far as knottability. And just the qualities that we're looking for in a fluorocarbon, the Cortland XTR is excellent quality stuff. So the knot that I use to attach my bite guards is the Albright knot. And I think it's ALBRIGHT, or we're just gonna call it AN. The AN stands for Albright knot. I use an Albright knot and to attach my bite tippets. I know that Flip and a lot of saltwater guys, they use an improved blood knot. So you can find each of those knots if you're interested in our knot tying section here on the YouTube channel. I've just always taught, I don't know, it seems like it might have been Larry Dahlberg, like in the 1980s, that taught me to use an Albright knot, but I know that Flip uses an improved blood knot to tie his bite tippets on. A lot of folks have asked if you can use the swivels to attach your bite tippet. And I haven't done that. Again, if I'm using a swivel, it goes between the midsection and the tippet. I've never used a swivel to attach bite tippet because usually by the time you get up to 60 or 80 pound diameters on your bite tippet, it's going to be hard to fit through the swivel, and it's going to be tough to knot to the swivel. I just much prefer, you might be able to do that with wire. This tieable wire is very thin, and it's very tieable, as it says right there on the label. So attaching it and just tying a clinch knot to the swivel, it would probably work with the wire. So for pike fishermen, if you're shark fishing or cuda fishing with wire, you might get away with that. And it would make some sense. I mean, we do love using swivels. They sure make They sure make contact leaders easy, just like tippet rings make nymph leaders easy. So we're going to talk about that. Anyhow, I think that's what I wanted to cover today. So you can take this simple 3-part leader formula that we've shown you, and make it a 4-part leader formula and add your bite tippet. Again, fishing for toothy fish. It's super simple. There's really no equation as far as what to use. I mean, you're going to have to be the judge of that. If you're fishing for small pike, you might get away with 20-pound or 30-pound wire. If you're fishing for big pike or saltwater game fish, I would go with 40 or 50-pound wire. You want to check with your guide if you're going tarpon fishing. What are they mostly using? They using 60-pound. They use an 80-pound. I know in the Keys, a lot of folks are using 40 and 50-pound mono or fluorocarbon for their bite tippets. So check with your guide or check with some locals as to what most people are doing. And of course, if you're catching 30-pound tarpon, you can get away with 40-pound bite. If you're catching the big boys, 80, 100, 100 plus, you're probably going to be 60 or 80-pound, maybe even 100-pound on your bite tippet. So, but again, I use an Albright knot, 8 to 10 inches right on the front of that 3-part. That 3-part leader formula doesn't change. In fact, it never changes. That is now officially leader law, which is LL, leader law. Okay, that's all I've got for you today. Stay tuned. In our next episode, we're going to wrap things up with contact leaders. I'm sure I'll probably do, did I say probably? I think I said probably. Probably. I'm sure I'll probably do another review of this. And that's never a bad thing for a teacher to review things. And we're trying to teach you all some stuff. Of course, and so we'll do a review, but I'll address some of the other questions that we've been getting about contact leaders, and then this time I really promise that we're going to move on to non-contact dry flies and nymphs. We'll kind of get in depth in both of those categories. We'll show you some complicated formulas, and then I'll show you how you can tie any nymph or dry fly leader in 3 or 4 parts. It's a really simple formula. We're really excited to share this with you. So I'm gonna unclick and say the usual. Thank you for being here. We appreciate y'all. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That really helps us out and it's free. Hit the like button. That just makes us feel good. Hop on over to our website and register for our monthly newsletter. That way you stay up to date with what Mad River Outfitters is up to, where we're going, new stuff. Stay informed. I mean, we really appreciate it. So
don't spam you.
And we don't spam. No. There's once a month. We don't. We're not going to come to your house. We're not going to knock on your door. Just once a month, we're going to send you an email that keeps you up to date with what's going on here at Mad River Outfitters. So as always, friends, we appreciate you being here. Once again, any questions, send them over to admin@madriveroutfitters.com. Every question gets answered. If you need immediate assistance or you would like to talk to a real live American, well, then you can pick up the phone and call us 614-451-0363. Thanks for watching, friends, and stay tuned. Believe it or not, there is more leader information coming your way.